Thank you for agreeing to speak with me.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
One of the main reasons is to talk about Jackdawg.
Yeah, Jackdawg.
So tell us about Jackdawg and the album re-release, because I think they were formed from the ashes of Southern Pacific group,
Correct.
weren't they?
That's right. In Southern Pacific, country rock group, California-based country rock group, comprising of John McFee, Keith Knutson of the Doobies, Kurt Howell, and Tim Goodman was from California, right? But we operated out of Nashville when that band broke up in, I want to say 1989. Yeah, 89. John and Keith and I wanted to continue working together. I'd known John since his early days with Clover, pre-Creedence success. I want to say 67, 68.
Oh, right.
So we continued on in a little bit different format than the country rock scene. And the album came about in 89, 90, over a period about 8 or 9 months, I think. We had no idea what we were doing. We were just writing and playing. We enjoyed it. And so we just got together every week for 4 or 5 days and continued with our musical efforts until we realized we had 16 songs, 15, 16 songs recorded. And what do we do now?
Would you say it's less country-based than Southern Pacific?
Pop rock, for sure. There's nothing country about it. We all have our country roots, into Americana music. John especially. John started out there, pedal steel, fiddle, mandolin, some of the earlier instruments that he mastered. But then he became a rocker in the 60s, but has never stopped his pursuit of excellence in the country music field as an instrumentalist and a writer as well. And so we decided to go in a different direction. We'd gone as far as we could with California country, as it were.
Was it a very natural process in terms of writing and recording for the group?
I think so. Yeah, it was. Southern Pacific was actually as well, but this was a logical extension of it for us. Keith and I would drive up from San Fernando Valley every Monday morning and stay at John's house. He has a recording studio in his tractor barn. And so we would write and record all day, do that Monday through Thursday or Friday, and then drive back to our homes for the weekend and repeat every week for many months. It got to be so automatic that I got to trust Keith's driving so much that I would fall asleep as soon as I got in the car. I'd wake up and we'd be there. It was about a 2.5 hour drive without traffic. So a beautiful drive. So, yeah, we were quite productive. We had learned to work well together for 5 years in Southern Pacific. And Keith is such a great drummer as well. I've had the fortune to play with 3 really good drummers in my professional career: Doug Clifford, Keith Knutson, and a fellow who's probably better known as a sideman, Ron Wixow. Played with Cher. Now he's playing with Steve Miller. Played with lots and lots of people. Played with Creedence Revisited actually for a while when Cosmo was having medical issues.
So would you say that Jackdawg is a very tight band? You were in sync with each other?
Oh yeah, there's a communication level that guys who play with each other for any length of time can achieve rather rapidly. You get to know almost what a fellow's going to suggest that you try, or what about this? What about that? It's all part of the same big net. It depends on where you're hanging on to, I guess. But it was very comfortable, very enjoyable. We didn't have to do it, but we wouldn't have done it if it had not been fun. And so we ended up with this large collection of recordings, and we had a manager actually a well-known studio owner, Joe Gottlieb from San Fernando Valley. He owned a famous recording studio, Sound City, and he was guiding us, towards a record deal, giving us input on the material and so on. And then suddenly he had a health issue and passed away, and sort of took the wind out of the sails once we had all the songs recorded, and they weren't mixed yet, but we other opportunities. We had the album. We thought that that was where we wanted to stop for now, to see if there was any interest in the public with what we'd done so far before we put more energy into it. And in the interim, John and Keith both got busy again with the Doobie Brothers. So, there's always something, right?
Does seem a bit of a missed opportunity when you're looking at tracks like When the Sun Don't Shine. Quite a big production, bit of horns there.
Yeah, there's synth horns, but yeah, we thought we'd try that. It's pretty much a guitar-oriented project with McFee all over the place on his guitar. But we thought that could use some horns, some Memphis-style horns. We've always been a fan of Stax Records and Booker T and Otis and Carla Thomas, Rufus Thomas. The Bar-Kays are a great horn section, so we thought we'd try and make a horn arrangement and stick it on there. When you're making a record, you have all the options. The studio probably provides too many options. I guess we might have went over the top in some instances, now listening back to it all these years later. But was it recorded in 90, let's say, 2010, 35 years? Maybe might have done a few things differently. But anyhow, John and I have been, we remained close friends. Keith passed away in 2005, sadly. John and I remained very close friends over the years, and he's still touring with the Doobie Brothers, by the way. You might have seen him in your neighborhood this summer with the Eagles. I think they co-headlined some shows in England. In one of our conversations, in many of them actually, we always, Jackdawg comes up, right? Just talk about all our past and what we're doing now and our what's coming up. And in the past, we always thought that the record should have had a better shot. When it came out on Sonic Pass, it was just released. That was it. Okay, here it is. And nothing was done. There was no media. I did some media. John didn't do any. Keith was gone, of course. The reviews were generally favorable. I mean, people understood what we were doing, and it may not be the most anticipated album of the year, but it was quality musicianship, good writing, produced well, recorded and produced well. And we thought that it didn't get a real shot. It didn't even reach the audience. Creedence fans or Doobie fans or Clover fans were never even aware of it. And so the last time John and I spoke about this was, I think, last fall of 24. And I said, well, I got a lot of time on my hands. I'm living abroad 6 months a year, and I live in Florida the other 6 months. And I've been retired for 5 years now, since Cosmo and I hung up the Creedence Clearwater Revisited project in 2020, just 2 weeks before the pandemic.
Wow.
Talk about good timing. Retire right before your industry goes away. And so I said, John, I think I'm going to try and do something. So, I just started put out feelers and contacted an attorney friend, music business attorney friend in San Francisco. And he was no longer in the business of shopping music to get deals, but he said, there's some guys, I could give you the names of people who I think are doing right by their artists and have some reach. It's not like going to be Sony or Capitol or Warner Brothers, but you will get a a shot at an audience, and people will know that you've released, and the public always decides a thumbs up, thumbs down, right? And so I ended up striking up a very good relationship with Arnie Shore at Liberation Hall. We come from the same generation. We're crazy kids of the 60s. And I sent it to him, and he was quite excited about it. He had a lot of enthusiasm. And I said, well, what do we do next? He says, I'm going to send you a contract. I said, well, that's jumping ahead quite a bit, but I guess you like it that much. And he said, I do indeed. So here we are. I went to work on the album cover, and as it progressed, John got involved, and we came up with new cover art, and we got the masters over to, the behind the scenes process of putting together a release. So that all came together quite nicely, and here we are with an October release.
Yeah, and you can, listening to it, you can hear with tracks like Bio Rebel, that can and is getting wider attention.
We thought that everybody expects you to play on your strengths or your history. We all have good histories, and why should we ignore them? So when John and I wrote Bayou Rebel, it was with a Creedence feel in mind, definitely. We said, well, why hide who we are? And John has been a friend since before Creedence had any success. We were playing the same places when he was in Clover with Huey Lewis, by the way. That was a great band, great Bay Area band that never broke through. Are you familiar with their history at all?
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. Where was it recorded in the UK?
They did 2 albums for Fantasy. Then without success, they moved to the UK. They came under somehow the guidance of Nick Lowe, and they ended up being Elvis Costello's backup band on My Aim Is True.
Wow.
So they're the real deal. They were the real deal. And then they went on to do other session work in the UK before the coming back. And that's when John came back to the States and joined the Doobie Brothers. And Huey came back and formed Huey Lewis and the News. But we played the same dumps, before we became before people knew who we were. and I've always treasured my relationship with McFee, because we do go back to when we were nobodies, as it were. As John likes to say, I'll tell you a quick story. I was auditioning to join Southern Pacific, and John threw my name in the hat as Jerry Sheff, Elvis's bass player, was the original bass player. Wow. Bass player on the first album, and first Southern Pacific album. And he didn't want to tour. And so after Warner's received the album and getting ready for release, the band decided that they need to have a new bass player and a new keyboard player as well. But John threw my name in the hat for bass. I flew down. I was living up in, where was I living? 85, Berkeley, I guess. Yeah, Berkeley, California. And flew down to LA, where they were based, and did a day of auditions. John brought me back to the airport, and I was carrying my suitcase, and he was carrying my bass through the airport. And he looked around and he said, "What's the matter with these people? Don't they know who we used to be?" I'll never forget it. It cracked me up. It's like, that's the kind of humor McFee has. So you can just imagine what it was like hanging out with him. We had a lot of fun. But so anyway, here we are with a real release, with a vinyl release, a CD release, a company with a marketing department, art department.
It's not just sneaking out on digital then, it's getting a proper physical release.
Absolutely. This is as good as any label could do for any artist. We're blown away. It's a great relationship.
You've referred to it briefly. Can you tell us about your early years? Is it you started on piano? Is that correct?
Actually, my first instrument was trumpet.
Right.
My dad was a horn player, put himself through university playing horn, played professionally for many years, and then I knew him as a horn player that played at my parents' parties at 1 or 2 in the morning. Okay. But there was always trumpets laying around the house. Once my brother and I were playing with him and left him in the driveway, and one of my parents drove over him. But they had extras. He had 3 or 4 horns, brass ones and silver ones. Uh, then I moved to piano. My mom was a keyboard player, played piano, classical piano, and church organ, that sort of stuff. Uh, so I studied piano, which was, I wish I hadn't stopped actually, because it is sort of the mother of all instruments, especially when it comes to understanding music theory. It's very clear with the piano keys, where it's a little more complicated on the neck of a guitar because of the tuning, the Spanish tuning of a guitar. You find your octaves in different spots. On the piano, it's all laid out. They just keep repeating one after the other as they go from low notes to high notes. So after that, of course, Elvis Presley, had to have a guitar. So I got a guitar, an acoustic guitar, that the strings are so high off the neck you could shave cheese with it. It was quite an effort to play, but I played that for quite a while. Then I acquired an electric guitar from the catalog store Sears, and I still have the guitar actually. Sort of a lousy copy of a Fender Telecaster, but I still have that guitar, and probably always have that guitar. Then I went back to piano when I hooked up with Doug Clifford and John Fogerty in junior high school. We put together a little combo of the Blue Velvets and played school sock hops and school dances and school assemblies. And then we got to be so well known around our area that our school would send us to other schools to perform at their assemblies. The great part of it was that we got half a day off. By then we were driving our own autos, and so we could load up, go play at a high school 20 miles away, then go to the soda fountain. We didn't have to go back to school. So we eventually ended up playing fraternity parties at University of California, Berkeley. And during that time, we got into the recording studio and tried to make records. John's older brother, Tom, had been in a band, and he was a singer in a band called Spiderweb and the Insects. And pretty cool name for the era, I think. And so we backed him up. It was Tommy Fogerty and the Blue Velvets. We were the Blue Velvets, the 3 of us, piano, drums, and guitar. And Tom did the singing. And so we played a lot of shows. So we were in the studio we were in the recording studio 2 weeks after I got together with the Blue Velvets and Tommy. So we were already recording back in the 50s, 59.
Really?
Yeah, trying to learn how records are made. Always wanted to, and then that's where the love for the craft developed. And over the years, we made, half a dozen different singles with Tom as Tommy Fogerty and the Blue Velvets. And we got eventually signed to a small jazz label in San Francisco, Fantasy Records. This is jump ahead to the 60s. Yeah, mid 60s. The Beatles are taking over radio. British invasion is happening. All sorts of great music are coming from the UK. And, like, hey, this is what we want to do. Why can't we do that, right? We've been doing this for years with sort of an unspoken goal of a dream of getting our music on the radio. So we really redoubled our efforts. We got signed by Fantasy. They had no idea what they were doing. I mean, they just put out really good jazz records. They had a hit, one really big hit with an artist named Vince Guaraldi, another piano player, called Cast Your Fate to the Winds, which is a piano instrumental. It was a sort of the main theme song of a Brazilian movie, the title of which escapes me. Oh, Black Orpheus. And so we went over there with our tapes, and they were eager to somehow get them. They were run by two beatniks, true beatniks, glow in the dark socks, beards. They talk like beatniks, bubby this and the hip talk. They meanwhile, the flower power, the love generation is exploding in San Francisco, and these guys are still back in the 50s. But their label had a great catalog of Charlie Parker and Cannonball Adderley, just great. Stan Getz, early Dave Brubeck, tremendous catalog of serious jazz, West Coast jazz. But they had nothing. They know anything about rock and roll, and they didn't really have promo people. They didn't have they knew how records they could get records pressed. They knew that much. But promoting, getting records played, they weren't so good at. So we released half a dozen singles on Fantasy. And finally, we changed our name to the Golliwogs, which is, if you know anything about British history, Golliwogs, you do. Yeah, Gollywog was a somewhat, I guess it would be totally politically incorrect today. It was the name given to children's dolls throughout the empire, dolls of color.
It was also a sort of cartoon figure that was used on Marmalade. So the band Marmalade had that on their drum cover as well.
No kidding. Unaware of that. But yeah, we had no idea what it meant. And we were dressed up with hats and wigs and paisley pants or checkered pants and paisley shirts. And this is what our manager told us to do. And since we were paying him, we thought we should follow his advice, until finally we just said, this guy doesn't know anything. We want out. We threw away our uniforms and changed our name to Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Before Creedence, can you tell me about Tom's role at the time? Because I think he had a role in leading the group. Is that correct?
Tom was a band leader when we first got together. He had the voice. The Blue Velvets were an instrumental trio. Tom had the voice, so we went with him. As time went on, John started developing a voice, and the two of them started writing together. And by the time we became Creedence, John and Tom had traded places. Tom gracefully allowed John to move to the front, and Tom picked up rhythm guitar. By then I was playing guitar as well, so we had 3 guitar players, and the decision was made that I would become the bass player. There's a story that's happened a lot, I think, in rock and roll.
Paul McCartney.
To name a few, yeah. The most notorious of all. I think Ron Wood played bass as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought, well, hey, this is a great deal. I only have to play one note at a time, and I get paid the same as the rest of the guys. So I spun it into a promotion instead of a demotion. And I think I did okay.
It's an understatement.
It's a totally different instrument. It needs a different approach. And at that time, the bass was moving from the background of just thump, 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 dump, marking chord changes and so on to a more upfront supportive role in rock and roll music, where it wasn't as essential in big band music. The drums were the driver of the groove. The bass and the drums became the key to rock and roll. And then it went from string bass to electric bass because the bass was needed to be more out front. And as it gradually played a larger and larger role, in fact, over the decades, some of the most accomplished and best known musicians are bassists. Chris Squire, many Duck Dunn, guys that used to just be in the trenches. There's a bass on the record, but these guys becoming well known in their own right. And of course, then with the advent of jazz fusion and those kind of musical genres, fusing of jazz and rock, jazz melodies and rock grooves. And then you got to see some really monster players, Victor Wooten, Billy Sheehan, on and on and on. There are so many amazing electric bassists now, staggering. I'm just, I'm Doug and I are always referred to ourselves as we're like pick and shovel guys. We're down in the trenches. We support the song. We try and keep a good groove. We play our roles in a rock and roll band. That's what I'm doing in Jackdawg as well. Keith and I lock up and keep it steady.
We were talking about that earlier in relation to Jackdawg, but in those early years of Creedence, you'd had 8, 9 years at least playing as a group, going out to those frat shows. So you were attracting quite a lot of attention with the likes of Bill Graham at the time, on the basis of you being in a fantastic live group.
Our records are hardly any different than our live performances. Creedence was a bare bones outfit. There was some overdubbing, of course, but that was even before the technology that they have today. But it's 2 guitars, bass, and drums for the most part. Some percussion overdubs, some harmonies overdubbed. Bill Graham was a big supporter of Creedence. We played the old Fillmore, and the first time we played the old Fillmore, the headliner was Steppenwolf, and then a Bay Area band, It's a Beautiful Day, and then Creedence. We were the opener for that show, and toward the end of the original Fillmore's days. Then, of course, he moved to Fillmore West and East, and Winterland, where the Bill Graham venues. We played the East a lot, 3 or 4 times, I think, maybe that many, and played West as well, in Winterland a few times. But quick story: one night we were playing Fillmore West. I guess Green River was out. That was on the charts, both the album and the single. And it's our hometown, right? Pretty much, we were from across the bay, El Cerrito, Berkeley, and we were playing in San Francisco. It's pretty much a hometown gig for us. And the second night, Saturday night, we played 17. The audience wouldn't let us off the stage. 17 encores. We didn't know that we had to start playing our set again. We had to begin, and we played everything we knew. Then we had to go back to Born on the Bayou and start again. Anyway, we finally wore out at 17. Everybody, went home. I think it was curfew at that time, and it was a 3-day engagement. That was Saturday night. We came back Sunday for our third night, and Bill Graham gave us all gold Omega Seamaster watches engraved on the back. It said, "With thanks, Bill Graham." And a gold watch is what you get when you're retired, right? That's sort of the traditional. I don't know if they do it any longer, but that was always a tradition. After years of service, the CEO would give you the gold watch. Well, Bill gave us these gold watches, and he says, "You guys should retire now. You will never experience another evening like you did last night." So yeah, Bill was an advisor to us, both on a business level and a spiritual level. We had the same sort of work ethic as Bill Graham, and with no nonsense. He would accept no nonsense from the artists that he hired, and he expected them to always deliver what the audience expected and paid for, and that was our ethos as well. We never wanted anybody to walk out and say those guys were better last time.
Did Susie Q come out of your live shows? Fantastic track.
That was one of the first tracks that when we decided that we were going to become Creedence Clearwater Revival. That was a track, the music of the Bay Area, the styles was long jams, right? Well, we were a song band. We grew up on AM radio, 2.5, 3-minute songs, and but we thought that we could have a couple of compositions that that fit into the long stretch out, let people groove, which is what the audiences were looking forward to do at the time. So I recall we were playing a club in a military base, I believe, near a military base in north of Sacramento, California. The Vietnam War is raging, and these guys are all partying up because they're shipping out the next day or two to the other side of the world to go to war. And so there was some serious nightclubbing going on, and we're playing 4 or 5 sets a night, and we always had to repeat songs because we knew that the people that were there first would not be the people there that were at the end of the night. So there'd be pretty much a different audience. So we could start with put Susie Q in the first set, then we could put Susie Q in the last set as well, because it'd be a totally different crowd. And one night I said to John, why don't we just stretch out on this song? We'll just play a regular instrumental, just the short version, and then just stay on the one chord, the E, and just rock out for as long as we can. And then we won't have to play so many songs, in the last set. And so we started playing it like that, extending it to 8, 10 minutes, whatever we felt like. And a lot of it was repetitive, come back to an idea that you've already done, and then, done that, let's try and change it a little bit and do it again. And so that sort of worked into the shape that we took Susie Q into the studio with. And then in the studio, the choruses, the different voices singing, rhyming words, because Susie Q was all about rhyming lyrics, right? Mine, fine, June, moon, croon, swoon. And so we took those and chorused it, and made a choir out of those, and then John put his voice through a mid-range equalizer for the second verse, so it sounded like a telephone, just to give it some more character, so that people would remember it, to try and differentiate it from everything else that was on the radio at the time. So yeah, that was our first single as Creedence, and I don't think it cracked the top 10 on Billboard, but it might have on other charts. But yeah, that was our first national airplay. I mean, when I say national, I mean coast to coast.
Yeah.
We were fortunate in that Bill Drake was a guy who was doing radio consulting for networks of radio stations at the time, and he liked it. He picked it up, and so when he picked it up and put it on his network, which 20, 30 stations were playing it all over the country at the same time, because the normal way that a song makes it into awareness of the public is it starts out in the little towns, and if it gets enough telephone calls or enough people who are going to the record shop and asking for it, then the bigger cities start to take notice, right? Their program directors, music directors notice what's coming up, what's hot, and so then they add it, and then pretty soon if you're blessed, you get added to a playlist on a big city station. And then when you're being played in Los Angeles, well, San Francisco's going to play it, and Chicago's going to play it, Kansas City's going to play it, and Denver's going to, New York, and Miami and Atlanta. That's how it goes. They still rely on, now with the internet, it's like how many spins and how many streams and so on. But so radio is not as important any longer to most music. Most of my royalty income, over 80% of it now, comes from streaming rather than digital or physical. Physical's a small part again, because vinyl is made sort of a comeback. But we went through vinyl, 8-track, 4-track, cassettes, CDs, I've seen technology change a half a dozen or more times now since I've been in the music business, some 55 years. But Bill Drake was the guy who befriended us and got us a national audience. And John just kept writing songs. John was hot at the time. We were a tight, hard rocking band, and we were always in the studio. Our albums were a bunch of singles and then a few album tracks. By the time it was to put out a new album, we had recorded most of it already because they were new singles. So then we went in and cut 3 or 4 tracks that was necessary to flesh out the album. And there you go. I think Pendulum was the first album that we actually went into the studio and recorded as an album.
You were so prolific at the time. It seemed that you had a single in the charts, the Hot 100, almost must have been constantly for years. And then I don't know how many albums a year. Was it 3 albums a year sometimes?
Well, we had in '69 we had 3 released, but the Bayou Country was recorded in '68. So we had 3 albums released in '69: Bayou Country, Green River, and Willie and the Poor Boys. But yeah, John was very prolific. Doug and I tried to slow him down, to try and get more mileage out, because we were having double-sided hits, which actually worked to our disadvantage, because when a song went up the charts, they would play it more and more. It'd be like every hour in rotation. And when they flipped the single over, started to play the B-side, that killed the A-side. So it was a blessing and a curse, of course. So it seemed like we were on the charts all the time, but that's how that happened. Some have done it since, released that many albums in one year, but we thought that for career longevity, we should try and space them out a little more. But John had a complete fear of being off the charts, that people would forget us. We'd drop off the planet. So that was another factor playing into this, but you nonstop Creedence, right?
At the same time, I think you were quite a straight band, not really drugs and not too much alcohol. Is that right?
I guess by comparison, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Like it goes back to our work ethos. We believe that we did our best work when we were high on the music and not anything else. We also felt that our fans deserve the best from us. And while you may think you're doing your best when you're being recreational, as it were, perhaps you're not. When you're relaxing, as it were, you're not expected to be on top of all the things that you would normally if you were attending to your profession, right? We always kept a clear line between work and play. And I mean, we had a lot of fun after the shows, but we didn't take our after show on stage with us while we were doing our work. We were one of the few Bay Area bands, if not the only one, that felt that way. Some bands had to get high to play, to do their thing, whatever they said it was. That's the way they did it, and that was their decision, and their audiences expected that and accepted that. Ours, I guess we were old school in that sense.
Was there any misconceptions about where you were from? Because you're a California band, as you're saying, but associated with the South.
Well, when we grew up, we're all from San Francisco Bay Area. I was born in Oakland. John, Berkeley. Doug, Palo Alto, which is just across the bay, south of San Francisco. Tom was born in Berkeley as well. So we're Bay Area boys. And we were fortunate enough to have an incredible diversity of music in the San Francisco Bay Area. We had pop music, of course, that was everywhere, Pat Boone kind of, and we had country music. At the time, the hit record charts were largely dominated by country artists. Country artists that had crossed over. Patsy Cline is probably the biggest example, but Johnny Cash, that had pop records. Frankie Lane, so Fats Domino and Jerry Lee Lewis were new to pop music. You know, rock and roll was new when we started, but we could hear rhythm and blues. There was a huge African American community. The Second World War brought people from all over America to work in the shipbuilding industry and support the war effort, both in Europe and in the Pacific. And everybody brought their music with them. So we were just flooded with completely diverse music. So, I mean, and at night you could hear radio stations from a distance, how it's a physical phenomenon where there's a layer called the ionosphere around the planet, and it moves closer and further away day to night. And radio waves bounce off of this layer. And so when it moves further away during your night, you could hear radio stations from further away. And so we could hear 80 miles away, we could hear the country station up in Sacramento, KRAK radio. And in the daytime, we listened to KWBR or KDIA, the R&B stations. Then we had KYA, and there was another even bigger AM rock and roll station in San Francisco. I think KYA was the first one, but so we had two big AM rock stations, pop music, everybody from Diana Ross to Creedence, everybody in between. So our roots show up in Creedence with the song. We go from Penthouse Popper to Cross Tie Walker or Bad Moon Rising. Of course, a lot of the stuff, the South was a creation in John's head, this mythical swamp location. Of course, none of us had ever been out of California, really. I think John made it up to Oregon once. This is all fantasy land. But the music itself is Howlin' Wolf, Screamin' Jay Hawkins, Little Walter, Bo Diddley, all of those guys. That's the music we loved when we were kids. But we also loved Elvis and Fats Domino and the more pop stuff, but Carl Perkins and Nashville, Memphis, those were big music cities. We didn't have to search for good music when we were kids.
I've discussed the sort of influence and sound on Creedence, but as well, John's lyrics as well. It seemed to also transcend political divides at time. What you weren't like a counterculture band. You were well received by all different types of people. Do you think that was one of the strengths of the group?
Oh, absolutely. The non-specificity of, excuse me, John's writing made the music accessible to pretty much any type of thinking. Right now, I mean, I think the Creedence audience, I'm sure, includes people from all across the spectrum of political thought. We did take sides. I mean, we were fervently anti-Vietnam War at the time. John wrote about that a couple of times, but it wasn't his sole focus. I mean, I think the human condition was generally the mine that he dug in, and there's a lot there. Don't Look Now is a perfect example of a song that could have been written at any time about any society. There's always been the haves and the have-nots and the takers and the givers. That's why we always said that Creedence has an audience from people 8 years to 80 years, from Herb Alpert to the Rolling Stones, right? Left, right, top to bottom. And that's why Creedence is on 4 album charts, Billboard album charts right now. Rolling Stone named Creedence the #1 American rock band of 2024. Wow. Some 50 odd years later, right? Who knew? We finally had our first #1 single with Have You Ever Seen the Rain? Digital single, of course, but first #1 single ever for Creedence. We only had #2s when we were active band. So yeah, our career has taken an exciting, different trajectory than I would have ever expected.
In the last few years, you had the Royal Albert Hall film, as well as some of the releases associated with it. What was it like looking back to that footage and remembering what it was like to be in London in 1970, because coming over to Europe, it must have been incredible to see the realization that you had a lot of fans over here as well.
Yeah, we had been pushing for years to get that documentary wrapped up and released. Nobody really seemed to know what to do with it. We were also fighting over who owned it and how it was to be exploited. So nobody did anything for years and years and years. It sat in the vault. And finally, the people at our record company finally decided that it was time to do something. Media had become so, there were so many new avenues with Netflix and all kinds of ways to release product. It was more feasible to do something where you didn't need a giant studio support to do it. And we already had it done. It wasn't like it needed, we had to put the band together and go out and do it. It was sitting there waiting to be finalized. So the real coup was getting the dude to be the narrator. Movie, The Big Lebowski. Nobody gets two songs and written into the script, right? A cult classic. I've probably watched it a half a dozen times. Like I can almost say the dialogue now as the actors are speaking. But Jeff really understood the project, and when he came on board, it was like, okay, this is going to be a winner. And they had the multi-tracks, they had the multi-camera shoot, and they had some assorted verite footage of band members being interviewed, mostly me, as it turns out, uh, to my chagrin in some cases. But I was excited about being in the UK, to tell you the truth. My first time out of besides, I've been to Mexico, right? And I've been to Japan as well, Japan and Hong Kong and Thailand, but I'd never been anywhere in the Western world as a kid, especially coming on tour as a hit uh, rock act, and being able to perform at such a grand venue as the Royal Albert Hall was exciting beyond imagination to me. All of us were thrilled that our little garage band had gotten this far. And so I guess I was overenthused to a bit. Some of it makes me feel a little, maybe too much. But looking back on it, what a wonderful project! What a great experience! And we played great. The audience loved us. I was really disappointed that we didn't do encores. John had already said no encores. We said, "What are you talking about, no encores?" This happened in the States, and he said, "Encores are fake," he said. I said, "Well, you might think they're fake, but the audience has a different opinion, and they're the ones that bought the ticket. If you played a lousy show, then you might have mixed feelings about, on a truly or strictly professional level, you might say, we don't deserve an encore, but they still want one anyhow. And and the customer is always right, as we like to say, in retail. And so, why would we not play encores? Because encores are fake, John said. And we had a big blow up in the dressing room one night somewhere in Kansas or Nebraska, I can't remember where John and Doug almost went to blows over it. It was like, why would we want to do this? It was just John trying to assert more control over us, which was going on constantly as the band evolved. It became, John tried to make it more and more all about him and less about all of us. I mean, nobody ever criticized, or nobody ever tried to take away from what John was doing, but John was trying to take away from what we were doing. And nobody would have ever heard of John if it wasn't Creedence, if it wasn't the four of us that went into Fantasy Records and started working for them back in the day. So because we didn't have a manager, we didn't have a trusted adult in the room that could say, "Now sit down, boys, and let me explain a few things that you maybe not giving enough importance to. Then we can come to a decision of how we're going to move forward together with the best interests of everybody, including the project in mind. We didn't have any kind of mentor. And so we were just young and dumb and full of it, right? As they say. Ultimately, that led us to where most bands, except the Rolling Stones, end up, and that is broken up.
Was it Tom leaving kind of what would you see as the end of Creedence in a way, because you're not
Most,
that four-piece unit anymore?
most definitely. Tom was a you know a great rhythm guitar player, a good, trustworthy band member. He had ideas like all of us, suggestions, some good and some not so good, like all of us. Before we were successful, we always went with the best idea. Who had the best idea? Well, let's do that because it's better than all the other ideas, right? We narrow it down and make a choice. Hopefully, not always, but hopefully, the best idea we'd move forward with, and then another crossroads, we'd make other decisions, right? As other opportunities would present themselves, and that's sort of how we operated before there was any pressure on us. But that wasn't able to function when there was a tremendous amount of pressure on a group. Our success was so sudden after 9.5 years of failure, or lack of success. I wouldn't call it failure. I'm sorry. It was just lack of the success we were striving for. We just never got there yet because we just weren't good enough yet, honestly. And when we finally got to a point where we were good enough, then we became successful. But then that success ultimately overwhelmed us because we tried to use the same tools that we'd used previously. We didn't bring our whole operation up to the higher level that we were expected to operate at. My background, my education is business. I went to university and have a degree in business administration and industrial management and so
That's
on.
perfect for band management.
Yeah, right. Well, I can see where Creedence was making a lot of mistakes, particularly with our money. We weren't touring correctly. We were wasting it all on airplanes, and we weren't touring. We were just going out and playing on weekends, which nobody else was doing that. They were all touring. At least they would go from city to city rather than home and then back out, home, back out, home, back out, home, back out. And so at the end of the year, we didn't have any money in our pocket because we spent it all, on hotels and airlines. So that was one of the changes that I wanted made. Tom wanted to sing. He didn't necessarily demand that he got to write, but he said, come on, we do one or two cover songs on every album, songs by other artists, either our favorites or even possibly a hit, like Susie Q was a hit. Before You Accuse Me wasn't a hit, but we always covered Good Golly Miss Molly was a hit. We covered other artists that we thought were influential in our early career. Ooby Dooby, Roy Orbison, Nighttime is the Right Time, Ray Charles. Tom said, why can't I sing a song or two on the album? I'm a good singer. He was a good singer, but he didn't have the kind of voice John had. John just wouldn't John wouldn't give him any space. And by then we were successful beyond our wildest imagination. And John still wouldn't give any room to Tom. And so Tom sadly left. Doug and I talked him out of quitting a half a dozen times. Said, come on, we gotta, the band is our strength. We're stronger together than separate. And he says, yeah, I know, but the band thing is, I'm feeling locked in. I want to do more. And John won't give me room. And so he finally left. And then we carried on as a trio. Sadly, at that point, John was still in control, turn it into what he would call a democracy. I would call it no different than than the situation previously was. Instead of leading from the front, he was leading from the rear. He said, well, you guys are going to each write a third of the album, next album, and I'm not going to sing your songs. You guys are going to have to sing your songs.
Was he trying to teach you a lesson, do you think?
Possibly, yes. You think? Yeah, definitely. This is what happens when you mess with the big dog, right? I'm going to show you your place. And so he threw us to the wolves, and you know, with hindsight, we probably shouldn't have done that last album, Mardi Gras, because it was a letdown for our fans. But at the same time, we weren't ready to give up our band. You know, we'd spent, over a decade just getting to the point where we were, and then to see it come apart like that. So we went ahead and tried. We tried our hand at writing, tried our hand at singing. I played lead guitar on one of the songs, played piano on other songs. It's just, then we toured as a trio. We went back and played Albert Hall again, and brought Tony Joe White, and he had a great band, Duck Dunn, Sammy Creason, a bunch of guys from Muscle Shoals, Memphis. We had a great time. We partied like crazy all through Europe. We brought a Learjet and flew all over the place, but it was, sort of, Rome was burning at that point. And we toured Australia, Japan as a trio, but it wasn't the same. The writing was on the wall. The album received pretty much universally bad reviews, or poor reviews anyhow. It wasn't a Creedence album, and we told John that it wouldn't be. When he was riding in a limousine one night with him when we coming back from a show in San Diego, California, and as he's laying the law down, you guys are gonna write a third, and you're gonna sing your own songs. And I'm listening to him, and I'm going, yeah, John, that's not gonna be a Creedence album. Creedence is what we're doing now, what we've done for 3.5 years. And he said, that's too bad. Either you do it or I quit. I go, well, okay. That doesn't sound like democracy to me, but you sell it any way you can to the public. And so there's been his version of the story and our version of the story for 50 years now. And I got no reason to tell any other story than what really happened to me. So that's my truth.
John's been out recently, and he's had a new album of re-recordings of Creedence material. Do you have any views on that?
Why? Is my I mean, John's done releases over the years, but he's never ever, since the mid 80s with Centerfield, solo album Centerfield, a few songs, Old Man Down the Road, Centerfield, Rock and Roll Girls. He's pretty much not had the career that he'd hoped for as a solo artist in a long, long time, decades. To go back for years, he wouldn't even play the Creedence songs, and when Doug and I put together Creedence Clearwater Revisited, John was boycotting his own catalog. So when we went out, we were the only members playing the Creedence catalog for a couple of years before I think we forced his hand, and he had to start singing the songs again. Back in the late 90s, 96, 97, 98. So anyway, I'm glad that he's, put that behind him over the years. But in a way, what he's done is just what a cover band would do. Basically, I look at his John's versions, I guess is what he calls them. And the way they came about is he went and dissected the original recordings and tried to recreate them the same way a cover band would do that plays down at the pub. I guess if you want to hear an 80-year-old guy sing Fortunate Son, it's your cup of tea. They're good. It's a good recording. He has good players. But again, I come back to why. We have the real deal already. It's certainly a collector's item for a John Fogerty fan. Uh, but I've heard that the tracks that were made available, and I know the approach that was used. I've read what he's had to say about how he did it, and it was a part by part attempt to recreate what we'd already done.
Yes, it's always going to be an impossibility getting it better than the original version, I guess.
As you know, part of the longevity of Creedence has been that we've been in so many films. The songs, of course, the Vietnam War vibe. Of course, we can't get away from Run Through the Jungle, Fortunate Son, and that sort of stuff. There's always been associated with Vietnam War look back films. But every time Creedence music is used in a film, there's a reinterest. And the documentary that we spoke of previously really reignited interest in the band's recordings. So we have a much bigger audience now than we ever did when we were active. So I can't imagine that John's versions will do anything. At the very least, they will create more interest in the original music. So it's a good thing.
And then finally, you mentioned about Creedence, but Jackdawg, Bio-Rebel. So that's released on Liberation Hall, and that's available in all the usual formats, CD, vinyl, and I assume in addition it will be on streaming services. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah, the Liberation Hall is going to do everything that they can to get this music in front of as much of the public as possible. I think Bayou Rebel will be sort of a free digital download. And I don't know if the company has actually picked a first single yet. We've got a pretty amazing version of Van Morrison's Wild Night on the album as well. That we were all sort of surprised when we picked that up and said, let's try this song. The hardest part was understanding what Van Morrison was singing. This was before the internet, and so it was very hard to find the actual lyrics. And Van is a well-known mumbler of when he's singing. His singing style is the words are just part of the style. The rest is the way he delivers it brilliantly. And it took us a couple of weeks to determine what the actual lyrics were. But there's also a very interesting version of Rocky Erickson's "Cold Night for Alligators." And now I produced 2 albums for Rocky in the 80s, and that was one of the tracks that we recorded. And then the Southern Pacific had a chance to record that, so for a Rocky Erickson tribute album, and so we did that one, and we thought, well, hey, it's me and John and Keith. Let's clean it up and use it as a Jackdawg track as well, because it was post Southern Pacific, really. So that's how that came about. But there's a song about, do you remember the Divinals?
The Australian group, I Touch Myself.
Yeah. Christine Amphlett, I believe her name was.
Yeah.
There's a song on the album written about her called "The Girl from Oz," something for our Australian friends. So yeah, we were trying to have fun with Jackdawg. It's so it went left, it went right. There's a really cool song that John and Keith wrote about the American Indians being moved from one reservation to another reservation called the Trail of Tears, where they marched them all and many died of sickness and starvation. Very moving song about that. So it's in a way all over the place, but that's where we were, is still fairly young men.
Well, it's great to see that it's getting finally the attention and release that it duly deserves. So fantastic to cover Jackdawg and fantastic to cover Creedence and your time in music, Stu. It's been a huge pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much. I enjoyed speaking with you today. You have a wonderful day and a great rest of your week.
You too. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
So long, folks.